Well, hello, everybody. This is one of the things I really like about this is the intimacy that you have in the audience. So I'm probably not going to stand here. I'll move around a little bit. And it's a big deal for me to be here tonight. And part of the reason for that is, first, when you look at Dean's resume, and John, literally what you've been able to done is incredible. And the impact you had at Harvard, the impact you had in the UK, the impact you've had in Shanghai, and of course what you're doing here at the Herbert Business School is something that you really should be very proud of. And it wasn't anybody could get away with inviting me here. And then as far as the city of Miami goes and the University of Miami, this is a place, the University of Miami is a place I wanted to work. And the city of Miami is a place I wanted to live. I will actually talk about that a little later on. And the city itself, as well as the university, you've got an incredible reputation from a national perspective with regard to entrepreneurism. And that's something certainly you should be very proud of. So when I say it's a big deal for me to be here, I legitimately mean that. This is an honor for me. And I wouldn't do it if that weren't the case. So I thought what we'd spend a little time on, we're going to talk about leadership. And I've coached for 25 years. I've also been actively, not as chairman, but actively in the business world for 24 years. That's 5 decades. In 5 decades, there is one leadership principle that I have believed in with everything in me. And I believe it's a competitive advantage, and I believe it's a differentiator. The success we may have had, whether in the football world or whether in the world of business, if I had to pick one thing that was the reason for that, it'd be this leadership principle. It's not just a professional thing, it's also a personal thing. This principle, this concept is the way I raised my family. 3 girls, 3 boys, 4 original ones, 2 stepsons. And it's the foundation upon which we built, at least my responsibilities at Merrill Lynch and TD Ameritrade, in terms of the standards that I would expect from our executive management team. And then at Coastal Carolina, it's the philosophy upon which we built the entire football program. Now, at Coastal, we actually call this BAM. It means be a man. Now, I'm not using that term per se because it comes across a little bit as a sexist, but I just said that this principle is what I used in the business world. It's the way I raised my daughters. It's the way my executive teams were held responsible. But I've got 125 players. I've got another 25 coaches, analysts, interns. They are all males. So the term BAM, be a man, actually worked very, very well for them. So the concept behind the leadership thing, it's not about some tough macho man. It's about a real man. It's about a real woman. But what it's really about is a leader. A real leader is somebody that stands on their own 2 feet, takes responsibility for themselves, treats others with dignity and respect, and at the end of the day, they're wise enough that they're going to live with the consequences of your actions. Now, I'm going to repeat this. I tell you, this is in my life. This is 5 decades. 5 decades, personally, and 2 distinctly different careers. And this is the thing that I believe has set us aside. So standing on 2 feet, take responsibility for yourselves, treat others with dignity and respect. A real leader always does that, but recognize there are consequences to your actions. So when I talk about this, if I'm recruiting, for example, we talk about BAM, or we just talk about this in the leadership world or my executive teams, it's very, very easy to say, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I got that. I can do that. I can take responsibility for everything. I can do that. If it's got anything to do, I'll take care of that. But the reality is this principle touches pretty much every part of what your life is and your career path is. There's probably no part of your professional, personal life that this doesn't touch with regard to the actual responsibility. But a lot of people say, yeah, it's no problem. I think it's one of the most difficult standards to be able to uphold. And what happens, people start to make excuses. So just let me stick with football and business for a minute. Football, and that was a lousy call by the official. Lousy call by the official. You know what? That coach doesn't really like me. I don't get along. I got a problem with my girlfriend this week. So, you can't be careful what you expect from me today. A teacher doesn't really like me. But I'm having problems. I'm having issues at home. We don't quite have the recruiting budget somebody at Miami has. We don't quite have that. All right? In the business world, we're not the priority business unit within the overall organization. The Federal Reserve has been too dovish. The yield curve is too flat. There's too much regulation that we got to be able to worry about. There's too much this, too much that. We want to be somebody in China. But now with the tariffs, that's screwing us up. Every time You say something like that, if it's your responsibility, what you're doing is you've got there's a subconscious. There's a subconscious excuse that allows you off the hook. So every time you say that, you're taking responsibility, but it's always somebody else's fault. It's always some other thing going on. And the reality is all you're doing is subconsciously letting yourself off the hook. And that you can't ever do. And this principle, by the way, gets better and better over time as you better understand it and become more familiar with it. So I want to use an example. There are many examples I can use in my private life. There are examples that I can use in my business life. But there's one example in my football life that I want to be able to share with you where there is no excuses. And it was, I think, 2013. We were a pretty good team. We're ranked 7th in the country. We're in the national playoffs. We're playing Montana. They're ranked number 4 in the country. Normally, we're playing there, probably 7-point favorite. Playing at our place, and maybe we'd be a 3-point favorite, but they're a 21-point favorite. And the rationale behind this is going to be the coldest game in the history of college football. What does that mean? It means -7, but there was always a wind chill, so -27 degrees. Now, let's put this in perspective. My guys practice in 72-degree weather. I've got 15 guys on the team, many recruited from Florida, that don't even own coats. I've got guys that actually have never been in snow physically. And I could sense in the early part of the week from the coaches and the players, we had such a great season, but, this is going to be a tough weekend. And so what do you mean it's going to be a tough weekend? We'll talk about the weather. Once you talk about the weather, what are you doing? You're subconsciously letting yourself off the hook. They're going to beat us. How can we possibly compete in -26-degree weather? But we had a great season. You let yourself off the hook. So I said, if the weather's the problem, let's focus on the weather. So what we did, we reached out to researchers in the Arctic. We talked about how do you acclimate? Well, you can't acclimate. But how do you live with it? How do you cope with it? And the big key was you can't let body heat. You can't lose any of your body heat. So we did nothing every day. No, we did practice, but we gave up 30 minutes of practice every day to just focus on this. We spent meetings on it. We did everything that we possibly could. We show up. I give you an example, a simple example. And we only use one bench. So the players come off the field, they switch the parkers with the guys on the bench, and we got about 12 people that can sit there. All right, you take your helmet off, usually come off the field. You can't do that because you're going to lose body heat. So you take it off when you sit down. You put it between your feet. We rented torpedo engines, torpedo heaters, which are like little jet engines. We put one on one side, one on the other side. So they're like taking care of your feet and your helmet, and we got radiant heaters that are above your head. So by the time it's time for you to go back on the field, your feet are warm, your helmet's warm, and your head and your shoulders are warm. And we only got to be on the field for 4 or 5 minutes. There's nothing we were able to drink that didn't freeze. So we made chicken soup, and we got every thermos that Missoula, Montana had, and we put it in there, and that's how our guys were able to drink on the sidelines. Now, football coaches are a great breed, okay? But most of us are real blockheads, real blockheads. And one of the areas where we're the biggest blockheads is like these conditions. How are you going to handle it? Well, you got to be tougher than this. It's, first of all, we're the Grizzlies. We're the Montana Grizzlies. By the way, the headlines for this was the Cowboys are playing the Beach Boys. And nobody gave us any shot at this one. And so you're tougher than these guys. Are you kidding me? These guys are traveling 2,500 miles. They spend all the time on the beach. We are mountain men. We know what the cold is. But I checked it out. They never had average temperature in Montana in December like 22 degrees. They never had -27 degrees. But you're going to be tougher than the other guys. You know how many coaches say that? Not 90%, but the majority of them. And that's literally what they expect. All right. So, we were doing a million other things to kind of handle the weather. And here they come out on the field. They're wearing short sleeves. And I have no doubt, and I found out afterwards, the coach is telling me, you guys are tougher than these guys. Are you kidding me? These are the Beach Boys. Well, didn't get off to a great start. They scored the first 14 points. But then they probably started to get cold, my guess, because they had short sleeves on. And we ran the next 42 points. And we beat them 42-21. And I couldn't be prouder of that game. But I'm using that game as an example. 99 out of 100 football programs would have gone out there, maybe they would have been prepared, but they would have gone out there with the understanding is, how can we're coming from the South, it's not in the cold, this is Arctic conditions, how can we possibly compete? We had a great season, we gave it our best, and that's it. Now, by the way, if we lost the game, I'm okay with that. But you got to give it your best. You got to take responsibility for that. All right, so when I talk about leadership, I thought, And Dean, you can pull me off here if you want to. You can stop me from talking. Because I know you told me 25 minutes, so I'm probably going a few minutes past that. Because we've got Q&A afterwards. But for what I'm going to talk about with regard to those the leadership principles, I think to really understand that, it's probably helpful for you to understand my private background. Not the stuff that Dean read, not the stuff that's out there in public, but my personal background. You can appreciate a little bit more why I believe so much in all this. My dad was an Italian immigrant, never finished 8th grade. Mom, an Irish immigrant, never finished 10th grade. They got married. 7 of us, I'm the oldest of 5, 7 of us lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. In the Dyckman Street section of New York City was a gang area. Certainly a gang area when I was there. Put that in perspective, I was part of a gang from the time I was 10. 2 of my best friends that I was with literally every day in grammar school got killed in high school. One died of a drug overdose. The other was killed by the police robbing a liquor store. Had I not been playing high school football, I wouldn't have been with a guy doing the drugs. But not maybe, 100%, I would have been with a guy robbing a liquor store. And that kind of woke me up a little bit. And my senior year, my real goal, I want to play football and baseball in college. And instead, my girlfriend gets pregnant. And so my football, baseball, college career is gone. The athletic piece of my life is gone. And that's one of the things that helped keep me sane over that part of my lifetime. Now, my dad's advice to me was, that's fine, you're going to support your family, that's great, but you work in the fruit store. He sold bananas and apples in the Bronx. I worked for him from the time I was 10. I said, Dad, I think I got to go to college. He said, well, son, there's no money. I said, well, I got to figure that out. He goes, well, don't go to college, come to work in a fruit store. Think about it. I did. I came back to him a day or 2 later, and this is what he said. He said, Dad, I'm going to go to college. He said, son, you're making one of the biggest mistakes of your life. Now, he didn't say that mean. He really meant that. Really meant that. But that's not the vote of confidence I'm looking for at this particular time of my life. So I wound up going, again, live in New York City. I wound up going to Fordham University in the Bronx. And my freshman year, I'm responsible for my daughter, my wife, and every penny of my education. I'm driving a New York City taxi cab. I'm driving a truck for the post office. And of course, working my father's fruit store. Now, this won't shock you, but this wasn't the most fun a freshman ever had in the history of college freshmen. And the one thing I realized I was missing was the sports piece. So that's really how I began my coaching career. So my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I was coaching high school ball during the season. I worked at my dad's store in the off season. That's how my coaching career started. Now, fast forward a bit. Fast forward 13 years. I'm now the defensive coordinator at Dartmouth in the Ivy League. And now that same girl I married, we now have 4 kids. So I'm in the middle of a staff meeting, and it's my first season there. And the sheriff from town comes in and knocks on the door, and he needs to see me. And I think there's a death or something in the family. He says, Coach, I'm sorry. And he hands me divorce papers. Now, I couldn't afford to live on my own and still support my wife and 4 children. So I got permission to move into a storage room right above the football office. I didn't mind that so much, but it had no heat. This is New Hampshire. The average temperature in wintertime is about 8 degrees. All right, so I could see my breath for about 5 months. All right, now, fast forward a little bit. January 1984, and here gets the exciting story, and I'm getting goosebumps. Okay, Miami upsets Nebraska for the national championship. In effect, the city of Miami beats the state of Nebraska. Howard Schnellenberger was your head coach. Tom Olivadotti was your defensive coordinator. Schnellenberger, Mike Archer was your secondary coach. He gets the head job at LSU. Olivadotti, the next year, got a commitment, he's going to go to the Cleveland Browns. They contact me and said, you come down and coach a secondary, you take Archer's place, and then when Tom goes to the Cleveland Browns, I'm going to succeed him as defensive coordinator. Now, I'm going to go from defensive coordinator in the Ivy League to defensive coordinator at the #1 team in the nation. That's like a dream. And ultimately, I want to be a major head coach at a big school. And every one of those guys got phenomenal jobs. I couldn't ask for a better job. Toughest career decision I've ever made in my life, because it meant I had to give up football, was turning the job down. And the reason why I turned the job down, a football coach, we work about 80 hours a week. We don't get a day off during the season. Especially back then, we didn't make money, but I'm going to live in Coral Gables or Miami. I'm going to live in Miami. No, I'm going to live in Miami. But my kids are still living in New Hampshire with their mom. I can't afford flying back and forth. And what I did was, I didn't believe I could do my job as a coach if I couldn't live up to my responsibilities as a father. That's why I turned the job down. Merrill Lynch was good enough to put me in their institutional MBA training program. There were 26 of us, 25 MBAs and 1 football coach. And everybody said, this football guy is never going to make it here. Well, a few years later, all those MBAs were working for me. I couldn't be prouder of the 17 years that I had at Merrill Lynch. Then after the dot-com boom, the online world was struggling, and I moved from New York City to Omaha, Nebraska to take the TD Ameritrade, the Ameritrade job at the time. Ameritrade job. Now, again, Dean read some of those numbers. Couldn't be prouder of that. In 2008, when I stepped down, that's when they asked me to be chairman. But that 500% return outperformed every financial firm in the globe. And that was right after the financial crisis. We did nothing wrong in the financial crisis. So frankly, I had never been in more demand in my life. I was a hot commodity. Then I get a call from a group of alumni at Yale telling me at the end of the 2008 season, there's a chance the football job would be on. Would you be interested? And I go, guys, I haven't coached football for 20-something years. He said, yeah, but we spent a lot of time thinking about this. We think you got the skill sets, but we actually think you have competitive advantages that no other coaches would have. One problem with that. So what's that? In 140 years of college football, this has never happened before. So it's not going to be easy for it to happen, but think about it. Bottom line is, I decided I'm going to go back. And so I decided I'm going to go back, and that then led to the next 9 seasons, on top of my 16, that's the 25, and I stepped down last January. Now, you go back to the TD Ameritrade deal. As Dean pointed out, Schwab just acquired us. And if you remember those numbers, we're going to be $100 billion market cap. When I showed up, we were $700 million. We're going to have $5 trillion in assets. That's what we got to get to. When I showed up, we had $24 billion. Now, that's a pretty good run. And I will step down when the deal actually closes, and I think it's a great way for me to wrap up my Wall Street career. So 2 of those are wrapping up within a year of each other. All right, that's my background. So that helps you better understand what we're going to talk about now. How am I doing on time, Dean? All right. There are 3 principles associated with this concept of leadership. One is spiritual soundness, which means you really know who you are. You have your act together. Peace of mind comes along with that. The second is courage, the guts to do what you believe is right, even if it's going to have a negative impact on your career. The third is love. I'll come to that in a minute. Now, we could spend an entire hour on spiritual soundness and courage, but we're not going to. I want to jump to the love piece, because that's really all we have time to talk about, and that's probably the most important. So at the end of the day, this is not about making love. This is the power of love. And love to me, is the commitment to the well-being of somebody else. I don't care if it's an individual relationship. I don't care if you're responsible. I don't care if you're responsible for the business school. You're responsible for a large organization, for a football team. You got a small little group you work for. It's about others. Leadership is about others. And too often, leaders, especially at big firms, their egos get in the way because they really kind of think it's about them. They say it's about it, but that's not the way they function. At the end of the day, it's recognizing that. So when you really do recognize that, you recognize your leadership is about your commitment to the well-being of others. And you can see that sometimes on teams, right? You see that on a football team, a basketball team, a girls team, a boys team. You see that sometimes. You see that in universities. You see it in some high schools, certainly. You see it in some businesses, depending on the way they're run. So people kind of get that a little bit. But where it's most intense, where people see it the most with the family, it's the same concept, far more intense, but it's still about the well-being of someone else. Loving means the well-being of somebody else, not about you. Well-being of somebody else. So I have two personal stories with this, and then I'm going to wrap up. The first is when I was 13 years old, I told you I was a gang kid, so I thought I was a badass. And my mom got sick and she had to go to the hospital. It was the first time she had to go to the hospital, other than maybe have one of us. And one time I was going by my dad and he was crying. I said, what's the matter? He said, you're worried about mom. Well, my dad, I never saw him cry. So I remember going to bed that night and thinking, Dad's crying. Mom's in the hospital. This got to be really serious. And it hit me. There's a good chance I thought maybe, it hit me that my mom might be dying, or this is really, really serious. And my mom was an Irish immigrant. She was the only person from her family that could ever afford to come over here. So she's with this Italian guy. She's got 5 kids. My father's working all the time, a little bit of a nut job. And the only thing that my mom cared about was unconditionally love the 5 of us. And I knew that. And we felt that. And it hit me that I might lose my mom. And I had never, ever told her I loved her. So I remember going to bed that night, and I distraught, and I was up kind of all night long, and I'm praying, and I said, God, if you get Mom through this, he said, I promise I'm never, ever going to screw that up again. Mom did get through it, and I didn't screw that up again. All right, fast forward now, 9/11, 2001. I had just taken the job. I just left New York City to go to Omaha, Nebraska. I'm getting dressed in the morning. I'm seeing the planes going into the buildings. Now, the Merrill Lynch global headquarters where I worked was 200 yards from the World Trade Center. As it turned out, I had 2 kids working at Merrill Lynch in global headquarters, 200 yards from the World Trade Center. But there's nothing I could do about that. So one of the things about leadership, focus on what you can control. Focus on what you have an impact. Don't worry about the periphery. That's bullshit. You will not get your job done if you don't focus. So I can't help in New York. But clearly that's on everybody's mind, and I got to take care of my clients. I got to take care of employees. I got to take care of their assets. But I'm a little nervous. I get a call from my other daughter saying she just talked to Kara. She's stressed out, Dad, but she's evacuated and she's in Jersey City. The last time anybody saw Kevin, he was going over to the site to see if he could help. And, Dad, have you heard from Kevin? So, no, Ken, I haven't. So the rest of the day, I went through the rest of the day with a pretty good understanding. Both towers had collapsed, and it was a pretty good understanding that I probably lost my son. And with that, though, there was a sense of peace in that if I lost my son that day, there is nothing that I wanted to tell him that I hadn't already told him. And that didn't make it easy, but it gave me a sense of calm and a sense of peace. And that happened because of that episode when I was 13 years old with my mom. So again, it's the power of love. And people kind of see that right away in the family. But if you can take a degree of that and you turn that over to your personal life or your professional life, and the people that you are responsible for recognize that you really have their best interest at heart, they will follow you anywhere, and you will be able to compete in a way that others can't compete and accomplish great, great, great things. And there are people in here that I'm sure are already that type of leaders. But if you're not, there's no reason why anybody in here can't be the type of leader who stands on their own 2 feet, takes responsibility for themselves, always treats others with dignity and respect, and recognize there are always consequences to the actions. And if you're that type of leader, those are the type of leaders that actually shape history. And that's the type of leader that you want to be. With that, I'm done. Thank you. I said at the beginning, it was an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Stories and also the personal frankness in your remarks as well.
Laura, check what time it is. I want to check this later on. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just ask a couple of questions and then we'll open it up to the audience. But, you know, first of all, you've obviously coached, mentored, hired, fired a lot of executives in your life, probably many of them with MBAs or undergraduate business degrees. At a more granular level than the 2 or 3 items you mentioned as key criteria for successful leadership, you know, what do you look for when you're welcoming the new class of trainees at TD Ameritrade or Merrill Lynch? What do you look for in terms of the characteristics, and can you spot someone immediately who you're saying to yourself that person's going to make it? Are you able to do that?
No, I don't have that ability. I don't know if anybody's got that ability, but some people think they've got that ability. They're the leaders with the big egos. Yeah. The reality is, what if you're going to be successful? Again, pick the path, pick the career. I don't care what it is. The key is whether or not you can handle yourself under stress. So your ability to be able to handle stress is the first thing that I would look for in a potential recruit with somebody new coming to our firm. If it's a more senior person, well, clearly I am looking for the same thing, and then I'm looking for this responsibility, the leadership responsibility. Are you willing not to make any excuses? And if you have responsibility, that is your responsibility. You're not going to tell me it's too cold outside. You're not going to tell me there's an issue with the Fed. You're not going to tell me your mother doesn't like somebody. You're going to be responsible for that. That's the principle I've got to see. They will know that that's the leadership principle that I'm going to hold them to. Now, in football, remember, we call that band. So when I'm wrapping up with a recruit and his family, I will tell the recruit, if you come here and you can't play, so we were wrong on the talent piece, that's our fault. We did a poor job evaluating you. But if you come here and you don't live up to BAM, you will be gone from the team. And that will happen. I say the exact same thing in the business world. So if you're coming here, number one, I'm going to expect you to do the job that you've got, but I'm going to expect you to be the type of leader, stands on his own 2 feet, take responsibility for yourself, always treat us with dignity and respect. If you come here, you're not that good, I made a mistake, and we'll find something else for you. But if you don't live up to that, you're not going to be with us. So I've never interviewed anybody where they don't look good, they don't have great backgrounds, so they come in, they know what to say. But that doesn't mean they can handle themselves under stress. And that doesn't mean they're going to be where they need to be a year or two down the road. And that doesn't mean they're not going to make excuses. That's why we don't know early on. You got to be with the person for a while and find out whether it's a football player or a business associate, or I would say a professor, or even a dean.
Sure. I plead guilty. Mentoring, is that important? And what does it take to be a good mentor?
Okay, well, this is, to me, is a double-edged sword. Now, human resources, everybody's got to have a mentor, everybody's got to be a mentor, we got to do this. Here's the reality. Being a real good mentor takes time. And you may have a whole lot of people you're responsible for. And how are you going to figure out the people that you're going to pick one of them? Because everybody's going to know you're going to be that person's mentor. Other people get upset with that. So I think the idea behind mentorship is a very, very, very solid one. But to do the right job of that really requires a great effort. And you can't do that across the entire organization. But on the HR box, yeah, I'm a mentor. Yeah, I'm a mentee. But at the end of the day, I think you go back to the leadership principle, John. That is, it's about other people. You have their best interest at heart. And when they need to talk, you're ready to talk to them. If you see somebody help, you help. I don't know if that's a mentor, but you care about them. And more of your people are going to feel that over time than the handful of people that you mentor, because now you're not doing anything with other people, and you better give them a lot of time to be able to do that. So I look at it a little bit more from the leadership principle of this is about them, it's not about you, and I talk a little bit less about mentor. Okay.
Could you just share with us a couple of stories of mistakes that you've made and what you learned from them? Well,
I'll go through a couple of them, okay? So far I've been divorced twice. There's 2 mistakes. All right, that's 2 mistakes. In the business world, when Ameritrade bought TD Waterhouse in 2006, became TD Ameritrade. And so one of the things, we promised the street we would get so many dollars or millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of synergies, both revenues and with regards to cost. And, we want to be able to deliver on that. So our HR person comes in and said, as we bring the health and benefit package for the Waterhouse people with ours, we're going to be able to save $15 million, $25 million. I said, well, okay, how's that going to impact? This is our people, right? So your priorities are your clients, shareholders, and your people, because they're the ones that bring the value to the clients and the shareholders. So, is that going to negatively impact any of our people? No, I know this is great, but knows everyone says this is perfect. So we have one of our associate assemblies that I used to have every month, then later every quarter, and I don't talk about our progress because 10,000 people don't necessarily, I spend 5 minutes on that. I don't spend 5 minutes, and then I spend time on whatever my people want to talk about. And I know what that is ahead of time. So I bring up the new healthcare benefit package. And I'm looking for this is great. And I got the opposite. This is horrible, this is bad, there's a problem. Now, remember, my whole philosophy is about your people. And one of the women stood up. Her name was Patrice, and she stood up and she said, Joe, we feel you really let us down on this one. Now, this is 2006, and it's bothering me today. So just that fact, I'm upset with my management team. Everybody's happy with this. That tells me my management team is not in touch with our people the way they need to. But here's what we did. And again, take responsibility for your action. Here's what I think most people would happen. Make excuses, we're really sorry, we'll do a better job, but it's in place now, we announced it, there's nothing we can do about it, but we'll look at it again next year. I said, we're going to put together, I don't care if we already announced it, we're going to put together a committee that's based on our normal associates. We're going to put together another package, we're going to see where we are in a month. Next month, I called another associate assembly, and I rolled out the new health and benefit plan. Now, number one, I don't think that many people would have done that. Number two, we acknowledge we made a mistake. Number three, we fixed it right away. So that was a horrible mistake that we made where I felt I did let our people down, that we fixed and corrected. So you can make mistakes, but you got to acknowledge that you're making a mistake. You got to acknowledge where the problem is so you focus on the problem.
If you were giving advice to a coach of a hypothetical football team that had just lost its last 2 games to close out the season, what would you suggest that he do?
So I think, first of all, what do you guys finish, 4-8? What do you finish?
6-6.
6-6. Couple games. I was off by a couple games. I think I wouldn't be able. I know maybe half of this is tongue in cheek, but being a football coach, there are so many things that can go on in a program, and for me, when we're struggling, the first thing I look at is whether or not our guys are living up to BAM. Because if they're not doing that, then I know they're not giving it their best. Number one. Number two, a lot of people talk about, well, let's solve the problem. You can make a mistake, but you can't make it twice. Well, that's bullshit too. You know why? Because the reality is, if you're trying to do something great, you're going to make mistakes. So you've got to encourage your people. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you got to build on that. The knowledge that you have from learning what your mistake was allows you the opportunity to be able to fix it. That's not necessarily easy, but the ability to be able to do that is very, very, very significant. So what are your real problems? Because if you don't know what your real problem is, you can't fix it. So what are your real problems, and what do you need to do to be able to solve that? And be honest, don't let your ego get in the way and be able to do that. So if I were reviewing the program, I'd begin with, do your people, your coaches, and your players, do they live up to the standard of leadership that you have? And then if that's the case, there's your problem. If that's not the case and they're working really hard, then what you got to be able to do is find out exactly what your problems are and solve those problems.
Okay, let's open it up to some questions from the audience. So we'll take, just hold on for the mic if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
We only have one mic?
Hopefully we have more than one.
There we go. Okay, so now let me help with this a little bit.
Yeah, so
productivity.
we'll line
all right,
up
so
the
whoever
next
has
one,
the
right?
second question, raise your hand so you can get the mic.
All right.
All right. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you for.
Do you want,
I don't know if this
would
is
it be,
working,
can you
but-
juggle 3 at once?
No, two.
2, okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you for coming. You mentioned that 2009, 2008, after you were the chairman of TD Ameritrade, and you had that big decision in terms of your hot commodity. You obviously had a veritable plethora of opportunities in the corporate world. What drove your decision to change gears completely? And would you make that same decision again?
Well, I think when people, would you do that again? Remember, you got to hold yourself accountable for what you did at the time, right? So the way I thought at the time could be different than the way I think today. So it'd be hard for me to evaluate that. The number one, I made the right decision. But the reason I made that decision, I mean, I stepped down from Ameritrade just because I thought the timing was right and there might be something else I want to do in my life. So even though I was flattered by all these other opportunities I got, I didn't step down to go run Morgan Stanley. I didn't do that. So when the football thing came in, I couldn't help but think about it. At the end of the day, I'm not a football fan. Like when you talk about, that's why I didn't know your record. Now, I've done my homework on Miami. I've done my homework on you. But I didn't think about doing my homework on a football team. And I don't know who's playing quarterback where. I know what my guys are doing, and I know what our opponents are doing. But I don't necessarily know what else is going on because, frankly, when you work 80 hours a week, and I'm looking at 30 hours of film a week, when I go home, I don't want to watch football. I'd rather watch a movie. I'd rather listen to music. I was addicted to House of Cards. I'll see that again. That type of thing. So when I thought about, so what is it that I love about the game? Well, I love the strategy game. It's like advanced chess with 22 people moving at once with a lot at stake. I'm pretty good at that. Stimulates me intellectually. Putting together a large organization, I can do that pretty well. But the third one, what's always motivated me is the impact you've been able to have on others. What I want on my tombstone is the guy had impact on others. And at that point in my life, I couldn't think of anything that I could do better, that I would get greater satisfaction from, than really helping an 18, 19-year-old guy to grow up and really become a man. So I'm proud of him. So that's why I did that. It was the right thing to do for me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next hand goes up.
Just 3, if I may, real quick. Number 1, would you say that people on defense are better people than people on offense? Secondly, on a more serious note, do you?
That was a serious question? 'Cause I was ready for that one.
Secondly, would you think that, can you say or do you know if after this merger, if they're going to remain sort of separate entities kind of thing, or will this be an
You mean
entirely
TD Ameritrade? Okay.
as well? For example, I prefer the user interface better for TD than I do for.
Well, I'm delighted you're a client. I'm delighted you're a client.
And lastly, could you expound a little bit on that on your initial key, I think, to your story is being able to cross over from being a coach to somehow finagling yourself into that 25 plus 1 group at Merrill Lynch. And that, I think that is the big thing for us as students, I think, to how do we cross that bridge. Okay.
Okay. The number one, yeah, I like defensive guys a lot more than offensive guys. Number two, as far as the merger goes, Schwab has purchased us. Now, first time I began working on that deal was 2006. I've been working on that pretty much nonstop the last couple of years. This is going to be one of the greatest deals in the history of financial services. I talked about what the numbers are going to be. At the end of the day, because they bought us, they're going to make the final decisions on stuff. But part of the reason why they bought us is not just because the incredible scale we'll be able to have, but because strategically it makes a lot of sense. For example, our interface from a trader's perspective, a derivative, is much better than theirs. They say that. They would want that from us. And there are things that we've done that they really, really, really think they want to be able to take advantage. So they want to leverage our strengths. And but at the end of the day, it will be one firm, and it could very well be one platform. It could very well be the current Ameritrade platform because they think that's better than what they are. But at the end of the day, they're going to make those decisions. And then number three, I think in terms of when you're figuring out what you want to do next, I said there were 3 concepts, right, with regard to the leadership: spiritual soundness, courage, and love. Well, spiritual soundness is what you got to be able to address here. I'm going to go through it reasonably quickly. At the end of the day, most people think they know who they are. They don't. We don't. I bet you 90% of the people don't know who they are. And the reason for that, we've become a composite of, we are reacting to people that are around us. We become a composite of other people's perspectives. So who we are versus our mother might be a little different than who we are with our dad. Who we are with a brother, a little different than a sister. Who we are with a girlfriend, maybe, or a partner, is a little different than we might be with a teammate or a colleague or a coach, whomever it might be. And we tend to want to please other people, so that's who we ultimately think we are. So you go through an exercise, and the exercise is just about you. Who am I really? What's your name? Prizzuto? Francisco. Spanish? Okay, you're not Italian? That doesn't, okay. So you just start writing, who's Francisco? Who am I really? What's my favorite color? What's my favorite music? What turns me on? What turns me on? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? You just keep writing. And once you're done, you're writing about yourself. It's not a bad assignment. You just let it go, come back to it in about a month. I'll bet you change 40% of the stuff you wrote down. Because when you're going back to it and you're looking at it again, and you're looking at it really, really seriously, you think, you know what, I thought I wanted to do that, but the reality is that's what my father really wants me to do. That's what my girlfriend thinks is pretty cool. And that's not really me. Then you do it again. And you get to the point where you really do develop a real understanding of who you are. Once you do that, you have peace of mind. Once you have peace of mind, you'll do a better job of answering questions under stress. One of the questions under stress is, what am I going to do for a career path? So if I really know who I am, the next job I got to do is, what are the skill sets required in the job or the area, career path that you want to be in? Do I have those skill sets? Go back to your sheets. If the answer is no, because you know yourself, the answer is no, do not go down that path. Because you're making a mistake. If the answer is yes, you got to ask yourself one more question. Is this something I'd be really passionate about? If you answer yes to both of those questions, and you've gone through those exercises, you're going to have a competitive advantage over 90% of the people you're ever going to have to compete against. Now, there's one trick to this, not trick, there's one principle to this. You can never, ever, 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 ever show what you write down to anybody. Because the second you do, turn around to your best friend, you turn around to your parent, you turn around to your girlfriend, whatever it might be, what you're subconsciously looking for is their approval. And that's the whole reason why you don't have a good enough understanding of who you are. Mm-hmm. So this is just about you, examining your conscience, look in the mirror, you and God, whatever it might be. But you got to get that piece right. If you go through that exercise, the chances are of you doing something that you're going to be really good at and be really passionate about, a far greater probability than if you don't go through the exercise. That's what I would do.
Thank you.
By the way, I did that. I did that before I coached. I did it before I went to Wall Street. I did it before I went to Ameritrade, and I did it before I went back to coaching.
Dean, thank you so much for bringing somebody like Joe to speak to here to the campus. I know you brought a lot of great speakers, but I think Joe is going to be hard to beat. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I have two questions for
I thought that was worth clapping for.
My first question is personal, and you were telling us about your two children on 9/11. What happened?
Oh, my son made it.
Okay.
Okay, so 6 o'clock, I'm sorry. I know, 6 o'clock. I remember one lady came up to me after one of my talks when I shared that. She was crying. She said, you lost your son? I said, no, I didn't lose my son. And then she thought, what was that, a fake story? I said, no, about 6 o'clock that night, I got a call, and it said, Dad, this is Kevin.
Great.
And he said, I know everybody's worried. He said, I don't want to talk to anybody.
We were asking back here what happened, and so I'm glad you clarified.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, normally, like I said, my mother made it. My son made it.
Great. The second question has to do with TD Ameritrade, and I go back to the days of Ameritrade before you added TD to the name.
Yeah.
And in one of the, just today in your presentation, I understand why I've remained with TD Ameritrade, and it's because my financial consultant at TD Ameritrade practices BAM. And he is right here, Sean Gorman, and he is outstanding. But now I know why. And he literally lives what you just said today, so it's been great. But my question to you about TD Ameritrade is,
Sean, you're not getting a raise. Sean, you're not getting a raise, okay? But
he is really good, really good. TD Ameritrade.
that's great, by the way. I will tell his boss that.
Great. Schwab has been the leader in your industry. First, they lowered the commission to $4.95. You, Fidelity, everybody else came crawling and say, okay, we'll.
Oh, not crawling. Come on.
Well,
we made the same decision.
Kicking and screaming, and then Schwab went down to zero.
Yep.
And then you guys said, so we got to do it also. What made Schwab be the leader in that and not TD Ameritrade?
All right, I think I told their CEO this. Every time they did this is because they thought they would get greater market share. Every time they did it, they cut the price. We can't just lose our market share because you're half as cheap as we are, whatever it might be. So we got to match you. So every time they did it, all we did was take the revenue pool and shrink it and bring it lower. That's all we did. So every time they didn't gain any market share, and they just made less money, as we all did. This last time, and clearly we were talking to them, we didn't know this was going to happen, but that cost them $1 billion a year in revenue they're never ever going to see. But that's only 6% of their revenues. It cost us $1 billion in revenue that we're never going to see again, but that was 23% of our revenues. So our stock got hit more significantly than theirs, but both the stocks got hit. And at the end of the day, in the conversation, here's what I think. All you did was lose $1 billion a year. You're going to have the same market share tomorrow as you have today, and the same a year from now. So that's all you did. So I don't think that's a smart decision, number one. Now, the way to handle zero commissions is have a large asset base that you can really do something with. And ours combined is going to be $5 trillion. So that's really the answer to that. But I don't think that was ever the right decision. I was asked, they said, if you were Schwab, you've done it. I never would have made any of those cuts.
Okay. Let's take one last question here on the left.
Same here. Really enjoyed the presentation today. You know, I don't know, maybe you were born with BAM, but say there's a bunch of leaders here, future business leaders. What exercises could you teach us to sort of, you know, if we were a little BAM, we need more BAM? Like, what things that maybe seem obvious that you could share with us?
I'd begin with make sure you understand your priorities, okay? And then are you delivering on your priorities? And then somebody's got to be responsible in your organization for anything going on. If there's somebody, like that group's in charge of that. No. Somebody's got to be in charge of that. Somebody's got to take responsibility for that. So are you delivering on your priorities? If you're not, there's a reason for that. If somebody's giving you reasons why they're not doing it and they're not solving the problem, they're not living up to BAM. They're using subconscious excuses to be able to do that. So at the end of the day, I think you begin, at least as a parent, you begin that with your kids. So even when our kids, I remember they were raised on this. Even when they were little, there was things they needed to be able to do. I'm making this up now, but like, let's say you gotta make your bed. Well, if you don't make your bed, you're not living up to responsibility. That's an issue. Then you got to live with the consequences of your actions. What I have found, we all love our children. And when I talk to families, when I talk to recruits' parents, they all shake it up. BAM, oh, we love BAM. BAM's great, BAM's great, BAM's great. But what happens is because we love our children, when they do screw up, when they don't live up to the responsibility, we don't let them live with the consequences of their actions. So they get away with it. So we protect them from that. And if you don't have the consequences to the responsibility piece, it doesn't work. Did I answer your question? This lady had a question, too.
Yes, you did. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You don't mind, Dean, do you? I mean, I traveled all the way down here. You're not paying me shit, so like I figured you'd do it again.
Zero commissions at Miami Business School.
Thank you. First, you made me cry twice. Twice.
With the two, my
Twice.
mother and my son?
Yeah, but there was a whole series of things that, maybe because I'm sitting too close, but you made me cry twice. It was very
okay.
emotional.
Oh.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you, what's next? You said it's very
yeah.
important for you. What is next?
Well, I'm still involved with Coastal Carolina. I will do that for a while. I don't have to put a lot of time there, but I'm still involved. I'm still chairman of the board, and I will be until we close, probably 6, 7, 8, 9 months. But what I want to do next, I want to write a book. So I am the only person in the world who's written books that have been published on investing in football. And I want to write a book on leadership. So because I'm the only person in the world who's done it on investing in football, now I'm going to be the only person in the world who's written books on investing, football, and leadership. I want to do it. What do you think I should call that book?
Bam.
I think that's not a bad idea. Number one. And number two, because I've been so busy, I do maybe 1 or 2 talks a year where I actually get paid for it. But I'm in demand for that. And I'm going to pick that up a little bit, maybe do once a month. That keeps me sharp, and I'm only taking the assignments that I would like. There has been a book written about my life. There's going to be a sequel to that. I'm not writing that, but I'm sure I'm going to have to pay some attention to it. There's a handful of other things that may happen as well, but the priorities for me going forward will be to the book, and I'll pick up my speaking engagements.
Well, I hope you come back to University of Miami.
Well, then you got to invite me back again.
Indeed.
But not
Well-
you cheapskate, not you cheapskate.
Well, the richest man in the room is over here, the athletics director of the University of Miami, Blake James. Let's give Blake a hand for all the work he does. Thank you for coming. And, it's, as the gentleman over here on my right said, it's, been a unique experience to have you here relative to all of the CEOs that we have coming in and out, but you brought a level of sincerity that's unique.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for joining.
I met you, I said in the beginning, it was an honor for me to be here. That was the truth. It was an honor for me to be here. Thank you.
Thank
you.
Great job. Thank you. It's a small gift.